With that, let's just go around, introduce, and we'll get going.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Bush. I run marketing for Next Trucking. Next is a digital freight matching marketplace. We connect freight to the truckers that you see on the road. We've got 4,500 trucking companies on one side of my marketplace. I've got 7 of the top 15 importers on the other. Most people think of us as a company like Convoy or Uber Freight, and that's fair. We have a very similar marketplace. At the same time, we focus incredibly heavily on drayage for 2 reasons. One is drayage is a $60 billion opportunity that not a lot of folks are interested in tackling. And 2, those big companies that I just mentioned have all said, hey, drayage is really hard and we don't want to be there. At the end of the day, we think it's a really interesting opportunity, and we're focused quite heavily on controlling the first mile of the supply chain when it comes to container shipping.
Hello everyone, it's good evening, I can say that safely. I'm Neeraj Mahapatra and I control the West Coast operations for Toll Global Forwarding. And I don't know if all of you know Toll, but it's an Asian company, and it has a good presence in the US, but it was bought by Japan Post in 2015. And it's like a $10 billion plus company, but not many people know about it. So basically, I manage the ocean, air, and 3PL part of Toll. And we recently sold off the global logistics arm, which was not the best decision. But yeah, like nobody anticipated this will happen. And like all the shipping companies, we are doing pretty good. You know, last 2 years have been very nice, you know. And the US, like our president said that we want to hit 1 B for the entire revenue. So that's something which we are on the track for that. So yeah, like we are in each and every part of the supply chain, logistics, each and everything. Freight forwarding, you know, fun stuff.
Hi, my name is Soki Im. I work for a company called Ocean Pacific Marketing International. We are a reefer exporter company, so we do commodities like citrus, grapes, cherries, pomegranates, melons. Yeah, we actually have an office in Chile, so we also export from Chile to Asia, and that's kind of what I do. I actually am part of sales and business development, and I also take on some of the logistics as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike. I am part of Xtelligent, one of the co-founders. Xtelligent is a local company, probably the smallest one represented here today. Small company that was started as a spin-off from the university, environment. We were funded by the National Science Foundation, DOT, and DOE to commercialize what we call dynamic network control algorithms that focuses on rationalizing movement of packets, initially for information. So in the internet space, dynamic network control algorithms control movement of information, bits and so forth. We currently are also domiciled here in this 4th sector incubator and work on projects that relate to freight movement as well. So specifically connecting freight vehicles with traffic signal infrastructure as a way to optimize flow efficiency as well as energy efficiency and so forth are some of the things that we currently work on. We also work with major automotive OEMs like Daimler, Volvo Group, BMW Autonomous Vehicle Team, and others. We also have close partnership with the universities such as UCR locally here, who help us with evaluation of our technology.
Yeah, So with COVID, we've seen a couple of things happen over the last couple of years. The rapid expansion of technology into operations, finally getting things closer to where they need to be. But we've also seen major problems in supply chain. So if you were to kind of assess between the benefits that we've achieved and the vulnerabilities that we've realized, could you just talk through how you would evaluate that composite from your perspective?
You got the mic, Mike. Start off.
So would you mind clarifying that a little bit more?
So we've seen,
understood the question.
Yeah, we've seen both progress with the adoption of technology, which is in everybody on the panel's best interest, but we've also seen the huge vulnerabilities in supply chain operations, and from your perspective, maybe infrastructure-wise between here and the ports, like which has been stronger? Which one have you seen more of, and for everyone else as well?
And just to recap, I guess the second part is about vulnerabilities. What are some of the vulnerabilities that we saw? I think one of the vulnerabilities that I saw, well, I guess in terms of what we do to start out with some of the possibilities, and then I'll talk about some of the vulnerabilities. So in terms of possibilities, recognizing that the system currently, the status quo, is very disjointed. The infrastructure does not speak with freight vehicles, for instance, and even within infrastructure, the way that cities manage their infrastructure with, say, the state manages infrastructure. Just look at Euclid, for instance. As you go down Euclid, you'll notice that there's disjointed optimization of signal system. I would say there's an opportunity there, because when you enable cooperation and communication and cooperation, then all of a sudden you can go from this disjointed environment where vehicles are getting stuck, between, say, Santa Monica to LA, or between Upland and here. You can also all of a sudden enable better flow. So currently we're working on a project, for instance, which includes City of Ontario, which I guess somewhat represents what you're talking about in terms of opportunities. We are working with the City of Ontario, City of Long Beach, and the various different counties to deploy our technology into the traffic infrastructure. And we're also working with automotive OEMs that I mentioned earlier, such as, say, Volvo Group or Daimler. As they come off the freight, or as they load up the freight from Long Beach Port, they can all of a sudden have vehicles that are communicating with the signal system. So as they come up Pico, up to 710 freeway, which is one of the most congested freeway systems, I believe, in the region, if not the country, all of a sudden you can enable significant improvement in terms of throughput and so forth. So the project that we're currently working on, 710 freeway, 10 freeway, 60 freeway, all the way out to Ontario, where the warehouses are, out to Riverside potentially in the future, and Paris as well. This is an opportunity that we're trying to capitalize on. But in terms of risk, going to your second question, I think one of the things that we saw quite a bit, the notion of resilience is something that really stood out as we watched what unfolded over the past couple of years. Having these jolts within the system, if you have intelligent technologies that can cooperate and communicate, you can also get rid of a lot of these resiliency issues. So, having decentralized control, for instance, which is one of our core tenets, you don't have to worry about, say, single point of failure issues and things like that. So I would say that's one of the areas that we've been really focused on in terms of risk, along with cybersecurity. But that's another story, so I won't go into that.
You did a very good job. You touched base on a lot of different things that I would like to also expand on. There's a lot of bottlenecks, as an exporter that I face with on a daily basis. Terminals being congested, not operating over its capacity. Imports being super strong, which takes up a lot of the space that's on the terminal. So as an exporter trying to get our containers out, often creates bottlenecks. So then we're not able to return our containers in. So for us, some of the things that we try to do to improve the efficiency and overcome these obstacles is to work with our steamship lines, the ocean carriers, terminals, port representatives, our truckers, just kind of trying to work cohesively together to try to, overcome these obstacles and just, move as much freight as we could. But there's multiple issues I think the industry faces, shortage of chassis, which impacts both imports and exports. Technology not being as available, also to automation. We need more, I think, automation to improve the efficiency of port operations, and I think that some of the things that we are trying to come with the government officials who are trying to get involved into improving the supply chain issues, so then that way we can, get our goods, improve, because it's a lot of things that I think that we can all try to understand and work together in improving, and I think the government is doing a really good job into trying to work with the port to improve efficiencies.
Great points, and everything was covered very nicely. In my opinion, personally, this is, just don't quote me on that. Okay. So I'll start with the vulnerabilities and risk, like capacity issues, driver shortage, chassis shortage, all that part was, like equipment shortage. We don't have enough crew members working in the vessel. They can't go home. I can talk about that because I used to sail on board these ships at an earlier life, okay? And from there I transitioned to work in ports in India, some parts in Asia, Rotterdam, and then last 5 years I've been in the US. And I've seen it on a clinical standpoint, being a grad student in the university to being in the industry, and having seen places and companies at smaller scale, at medium scale and bigger scale. The biggest thing is adoption of certain new policies, new rules. Technology is the biggest issue, especially like at smaller scale. We are growing pretty good. There's good knowledge, there's good understanding, but at a larger scale, everything comes down to a halt because there is a lot of allocation, like I say, in all these big companies which are making good money, and that is becoming a big halt in terms of how we are progressing altogether. So that's where the biggest challenges were in terms of general implementation and adoption. But at Toll, we are not that tech savvy, and that's something which is a positive thing and a negative thing at the same time. Because a positive thing because there's a lot of opportunity to grow and adopt technology, and that's what we are doing in terms of RPA, like also internally how we manage our TMS and interaction with overseas, and externally in terms of equipment, general terminal connections, partnerships, things like that. But there's a long way that we have to go in terms of how we are progressing, general mindset of people. And like, trust me on this when I say that we have worked, like I have personally worked and we have personally worked as a company with the exec team in Long Beach, in the Port of LA, in Port of Utah, Port of Houston. And the one thing which we see is that like a new idea or what is there as a boundary of let's say freedom is not something which is clearly taken up easily with all the officials, and that's something that maybe with the new mindset, with the like supply chain logistics becoming the critical problem in the world. Like 5-6 years back, someone said logistics, they're like, we don't know what logistics is, and now there's good traction of people getting it, and traction is the right word basically. So that's something which the momentum and the traction this field was not having, and now it's having. So that's something which gives opportunities for the next 10 years, possibly for things to change. And that's the opportunity, I would say, in general. So, yeah.
And to Niraj's point, I mean, this is the first time in 20 years of being in the shipping space that I say I work in logistics and transportation, people know what I do. It's kind of exciting. But beyond that, I think there's a couple of things to consider here, and I think that the opportunities that we've been presented with the pandemic have created just tremendous opportunities for companies and tremendous opportunities for collaboration. Well, it's really easy to read the headlines of congestion at the ports and the craziness happening here. LA Long Beach just had its best quarter in terms of throughput ever for the 3rd consecutive quarter. Things are broken, but they're not completely shattered. And I think we've seen tremendous collaboration from governments, terminals, ports, trucking companies, shippers, warehousing facilities, everybody willing to accommodate each other more than ever before. So that's one opportunity I think is amazing. The second component of this is every time the light has been shined on a small challenge, how do you get an empty back into the terminal? A new microservice has shown up. And it's opportunities for really entrepreneurial small companies to step up and say, I'm going to solve this little piece of the puzzle. And they're finding funding because venture capitalists are dying to get into space and they're very interested in what's going on. And eventually that will create an ecosystem where there's going to be two approaches. It's going to be Apple versus Android. There will be closed loop systems, and then there will be companies that have started these small microservices that are best of breed at one particular thing that eventually, theoretically in my world, come to take over. And we're going to find efficiencies by all these little companies being pieced together. And a company like, you know, if anybody's familiar with Zapier, who makes it easier for apps to talk together, to me, there's going to be a Zapier for the supply chain. And they're going to combine all of these little silly things like, oh, I found an empty. Oh, I can make an appointment to return an empty. Oh, I found a chassis. Whoever's able to stitch those together is really going to have a tremendous advantage. And that, to me, Kevin, is the thing that we're going to see come out of this the most.
Can we ask follow-up questions?
Yeah,
please do.
I'll bring you Mike.
I'm loud enough. My voice is Carrie, but so just a couple questions. First, follow up on what you were talking about as an exporter. What is it going to take in terms of being an exporter to get do you have your own fleet of trucks, or do you hire out?
Oh, we hire out.
Okay.
So we outsource our trucking.
But I mean, what would it take to get the trucks going to and from the port more electrified? Other than, of course, I know we're behind on orders from some of the electric. You know, Tesla's not shipping their trucks yet. I get it, but I mean, I think it's like only a couple percent. We've been trying to get more electrification in the drayage space for years now, and there's been incentives, and I think it's like there's 2,000 or 1,000 trucks or whatever it is going in and out a day. You obviously know all the stats, I don't, but it's like a couple percent are electric, right? So what is it going to take as an exporter? Would it be something that would have to be mandated by the state, or would it be something you would do if it would save you money or be environmentally helpful or that kind of thing?
Well, there is actually a mandate already. In 2035, the state has regulated that all trucks are going to be zero emissions. So there is already a mandate in place. As of right now, our truckers are taking the necessary steps in investing into the technology for cleaner trucks. It's just, unfortunately, there really isn't the technology that's available yet. You know, they're testing it, but it's not to the point where it can be adopted fully anyway. I think it is, is gonna be, you're gonna see more and more technology trucks that are gonna be electrified in the upcoming years. But until there's a proven truck company that can operate efficiently, and part of it is the infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure in place to support the truckers to go across country. So we could do it probably locally here, but even then there needs to be more infrastructure in place to support that initiative. So I think for us, we support our truckers to invest into the technology and to buy cleaner trucks, and it's just more of technology is not there yet.
Hey, so do you want to figure
Yeah.
One just plug for one of the startups that is rapidly scaling right here, right down the road in Corona. If you're short of truck drivers, check out Relay on Demand. So they basically have a solution to connect small carriers with drivers, and they've been scaling extremely rapidly. Actually, probably one of the fastest growing tech startups here in Inland Empire, and they could potentially be a solution. They do a lot of work at the ports, and they're expanding, I think, to Atlanta, Dallas, and other areas of the country. But just check it out because it's a very cool solution. It's a local African American entrepreneur that it'd be great to get more support for their startup. So Relay on Demand if you need drivers. So just a little plug there. Yeah.
One other thing that I wanted to share when it comes to the EV space is, there are companies out there that are trying to get there, and it's great. Excess Trucks is another local company who's done some really interesting, really amazing things. I think, one of the things to consider is that 90% of the trucks on the road are part of a small fleet. So you're not talking about giant companies with tremendous capital being able to make an investment. So there has to be a mind shift to shift to an EV. Right now, most of the drayage drivers that are on the road are probably buying a used vehicle. They're buying a vehicle at a lesser cost, et cetera, et cetera. They're not seeing that upfront cost that comes with an EV. So we have to either create a new mind shift to say what's total cost of ownership, which is really difficult when you're talking about a small business, or perhaps a leasing model, some sort of government incentive. The question is, how do you knock off that first major payment in order to make it environment or economically friendly for a small company? That's in addition to the infrastructure that has to exist. So those to me are the two challenges. Is one, where do you charge it? But two, how do you make it easier for these companies, whether it's a leasing model, whether it's some sort of incentive that lowers that down payment, because a lot of these companies have essentially put a mortgage on their first truck or on their second truck. We're asking guys in 15 years to get rid of that mortgage and say, hey, we need you to start from scratch. That's a tremendous ask. So there has to be a shift in mindset or a shift in model, one way or the other.
So the $10, didn't we just start charging $10 a truck, every truck that goes in and out of the port? And isn't that to help create a fund to help fund some of the electric vehicle? But it's maybe not enough, because I mean, maybe it's going to take too, so it could take too long to.
You're absolutely right. It's completely a step in the right direction. That's tremendous. At the same time, it's paying off a mortgage $10 at a time.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to put like 1,000 new drayage trucks on the road that are electrified. Okay, got it.
So,
I just wanted to add like a few things, like especially in the last mile delivery in drayage and over the road trucks space, trucking space, that adoption, like which was mentioned, is very slow because very few companies. Rivian is another company which is trying to get into the space, and they have to first deliver to Amazon before they deliver to any other people. So that's another thing which is happening. So there are two ways to look at it, okay? Because I was recently talking to someone about this, and we did an evaluation. That's why it's fresh in my mind. So basically, there are two ways to look at it. Either go to a sourcing company which manufactures these EV trucks, or convert your existing fleet into an electric fleet. It's done with school buses, with UPS trucks and everything. It's already done. So at this point, middle mile is something which is growing in this delivery space for EV and autonomous vehicles. Gatik is another company, okay, which is growing in this space quite a lot. Okay, they'll soon be growing a little bit more, but with the tire and everything else, they're trying to optimize this entire flow of things. So big lobbyists pushing for the electrification is something which is needed in terms of conversion. That is possible, but it needs a big push in terms of how we are going. Clean truck fee is another thing, because I was doing the pricing recently, so I saw that, so that's there. But even though there's technology, the policy making is another thing that needs to be in place just for us to go forward. So, yeah.
Okay, so we're getting tight on time. I want to make sure we have enough for everybody to ask questions if you haven't. But there's kind of one question that I really want to get to, and that is the lack of startups in this space. Even though we have representation in the region, how can we create those tech startups to solve these problems? If you could each give us your one thing that you think would be the most important to support, so that we're solving these problems, these externalities, these challenges with technology that's grown here in the region and exported around the world, to give that benefit not only here locally but everywhere else. What would be that one thing that you would look into the future and, like, if you could snap your finger, you would change?
Definitely, I'll start with this. So like Mike mentioned, the Zapier, I've used it. Okay, it's pretty good. So the word we're looking for is plug and play, basically. I'm sure there's a company like that. Okay, but even in that perspective, so that's where the integration model is where we need to look at. So I think I can safely quote Maersk over here. 10 years back, Maersk as a company didn't like to be called as a supply chain logistics company. And guess what? Last 7-8 years back, they called themselves as integrated logistics and supply chain companies. So that's where the mindset is going. So in my opinion, like Mike mentioned, very, very good point. Small, like everybody's trying to do the end-to-end part, the bigger challenge, okay? And if you don't have the infrastructure knowledge, a lot of things are involved in this. Like getting the best minds is just not enough. What needs to happen is we need to have that one thing taken care in the first place, and then take the entire thing into consideration. So the biggest thing which I would think is important is the general consolidation of technology, like what we have, like from the start to end. Like if we have like origin, let's say, a vessel is operated, it gets started, we see the tracking in place, all the documents. That's the biggest thing basically. If you see all the doc packs which are transferred and everything. So that part, how that communication, that information is being translated in different layers, and how that is being disseminated at various levels is the most important thing. And if a startup is able to do that part, solve that small part of transfer of information from A to B, and B is the destination, altogether towards the end, that is something which will be a bigger help than creating these smaller applications of each and everything, of traffic route optimization, things like that, because that information, that data is the most important thing, which basically gives you the lead time, which then dictates your demurrage fees, storage fees, and everything else from there. So yeah.
So, okay, you want to go next? Okay. So Kevin, your question is if I could have one wish, or snap my fingers and have one change. You know what it is? I think nobody gets into supply chain on purpose. I think we all fell into this industry in some way, shape, or form. And I think if we can make the industry sexy, that in a way that college kids start to think about it interesting. And I think if you said to a college kid, hey, listen, do you want to work in shipping logistics? The answer is no. If you had said to a college kid, what if I told you could transform the environment and tackle an organization that would theoretically be one of the 5 worst countries for the environment? Most kids say, yeah. I think if you told a college kid, hey, I need you as an engineer to design an Iron Man-like suit that saves lives and makes it safer at the port, kids would say, yeah. So I think that's the component. I think taking this moment in the spotlight that's been driven by a pandemic and making this industry and highlighting what's possible in the industry, that would be my fingers now.
Awesome. Thank you.
I have too many, so I can't think of just one. I guess if I had to come up with just one thing, I would have to say just, having a better infrastructure. Infrastructure in a sense where we can automate things, where we don't have to have the manpower to, so that way people can do other things that will create more meaning, I think. But yeah, I would like to see more automation in place and more infrastructure built.
Well, from my perspective, I would say if there's one thing to really spur entrepreneurship in the supply chain logistics space, maybe a significant expansion of the SBIR program would be one, because right now, logistics, infrastructure, that whole space is very complex. There's a significant amount of technical risk associated with it, right? VCs are typically willing to take on commercial risk, but not technical risk, technology risk. So my company was fortunate enough to have enough technical merit to be able to secure SBIR Phase 1, Phase 2, and additional research funding, but not everyone is lucky that way. We had, fortunately on my team, I had some scientists that had ties to the NSF funding program, for instance, but not everyone is lucky that way. But there are lots of talent out there that can also benefit from these kind of programs. So if we can expand that kind of capital resource that can fund technical risk, and ultimately, anything that is really worthwhile doing, I think, at least from my perspective, there's a lot of technical risk associated with it. Cancer research and stuff like that as well, right? Which I always allude to. So yeah, if we can expand the SBIR STTR program, make that like 10 times bigger, I think that would be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. We have to move on to the next, or can we have a few questions? All right, we have time.
Yeah.
You want the mic?
Yeah, sure. Just in case. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
You're not Scott's big voice.
Great information. So just wanted to pick your brains from a different perspective. So I coach a lot of up-and-coming small businesses that are feeling the crunch and are tied to inventory. And they're focused on getting out to market and selling, but they're not anticipating what we're experiencing now. So if you were just going to advise entrepreneurs who are highly based, have an inventory-based business, and they need to be careful just with all that you know, the ebbs and flows, any just general advice, you know, for the young entrepreneur to say, hey, these are some best practices, whether it's technology, just so they can have the product to sell instead of waiting so long because they didn't know about enough vendors, or they just didn't know what they didn't know. Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question because yes, I have worked in the warehousing space, so inventory is the biggest thing which we see altogether. The containers that are coming in, broken down and then stored. And that is the biggest thing, that if you don't have the right demand, that space, like the way I see and some of the things which people say, what they say, what is logistics? Movement of goods. I want to change that notion basically. It has to be somewhere in terms of mostly allocation of space, buying space and selling space across. That's how it is. You're buying a certain X amount of space in a certain Y part of the world, and that's how it goes. So if that space is not like taken up, or if it's not sold off, then it's a burden, and then you try to get into the salvage part of it and try to make something out of it. So the biggest thing that can be like kind of shown of what these entrepreneurs should do is to see where this demand lies, which of course they have done, okay, but have they done it only like locally, regionally, or nationally, or internationally? That's one thing, because you have to also see that in global trade, in general trade economics, you have to see how different countries are treating these trade laws, okay, and take advantage of it basically. That's one thing. So something or the other, let's say like this inventory is a part of a puzzle basically, okay, and it fits somewhere else. So that figuring out that part is important, okay, and then maybe getting more collaborators, okay, because during this pandemic period we saw a lot of these technology delivery companies, okay, TikTok blowing up basically, and they trying to say, hey, try this string, try this app, and everybody's trying to follow because we're all on our phones trying to see new things, and that's how we get to know about things. Like if I don't see Instagram and LinkedIn, I don't know what is happening in the world, and Twitter. I should have said that first, not Instagram. but okay, like from that perspective, it's like we have to devise, like we have to change, re-engineer the mindset of how the world is moving, okay? Try to like take the physical aspect and digital aspect and merge it, like phygital or something like that, you know, in terms of that. Just made a word right now. But yeah, from that perspective, it just helps, you know, because now things are changing, okay? And now is the opportunity to actually adapt, make new technology, outsource new technology, you know, connect with people, because I'll say one thing, that all of us are experiencing the same thing. This is not a unique problem. Everybody is facing through. It's like going through puberty. Everybody goes through it. Okay. so from that perspective, it just makes sense for us to see who else is having the same problem, connect with them, and move forward with it. Because collaboration, cohesiveness, you know, and collective, you know, shared economy is something which is where we should be heading. Okay. A lot of boundaries there. I get it. A lot of friction is there. But if someone starts, people will follow. And when people will follow, like Mike said, bigger companies will try to buy them off, and that's it. That becomes a practice. And once it becomes a practice, it becomes law, and that's it. Everybody's following the law, as human beings should. Yeah.
I love your question. I love your question so much. So here would be my piece of advice. You're going to find a ton of companies in the freight and transportation space who say, oh, we give you the tools to do it yourself. Go a different direction. Here's the problem. When you look at companies that are saying, oh, we've got a small business solution where we empower you, give us your credit card, we'll make it easy to book freight. you're giving the tools to handle their supply chain to the folks who don't necessarily come from a supply chain world. We're giving self-service as an industry, not Next Trucking, but as an industry, we're giving self-service to the wrong folks. So that's problem number one. To counter that, find a 3PL that you trust, third-party logistics provider that is taking companies through this and help them out. One of my favorite stories is there's a health drink company that when they got started, and we worked with them for a while, their founders said to me, I went to Google and my first 50 search results and first 50 phone calls were to movers who were moving apartments, and they couldn't actually handle my goods because I was looking for a trucker. They didn't know what they didn't know what they didn't know. So find a 3PL. And the first question to ask a 3PL is, what type of redundancy do you have? And what type of diversification do you have across your warehousing space? Inevitably, something is going to go wrong in the supply chain. We've seen it for the past couple of years, more so than ever. So having plan B and C already in place to overcome that is really going to be critical for startups as they're helping you scale. Presumably, they're not hiring a chief supply chain officer on day 5, right? Which is fine. Find somebody that can serve in that role in an outsourced fashion as a 3PL, and that can actually educate the company and help them through that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you guys have touched base on all the key points. I mean, really, it's networking. I mean, the biggest thing that I am a big advocate for is networking, meaning people that are not only in your industry, but outside of it, you know, talking to as many people as possible, and learning, you know, about different aspects of the industry. I mean, supply chain is one of probably the biggest component there is, and it's also the biggest buzzword since the pandemic started. So I think, you know, learning a little bit more about that and connecting with people in it can actually help them.
I don't know if I have too much more to say. You know, speaking with stakeholders and customers, I think that those are all really important things. Probably one of the first things that you should be thinking about. But as an entrepreneur, I would say one of the biggest challenges for me was just taking that first step. So, you know, you can, once you take that first step, you can, you know, navigate. You know, as you learn, you can figure out ways to continue to move forward. But taking that first step was the scariest part. So. I think there was an interesting quote by Steve Jobs. I can't recall exactly how, you know, I can't remember the details of it, but he said something along the lines of, it's hard to make the first steps. It's only when you look backwards that you can connect the dots. So that first step, I think, is always the scariest, but the most important. And if you can do that, I think you're on the right path.
Why isn't the industry, why isn't the ports and what's the big, Maersk, is it Maersk? Maersk, yeah. Why isn't Maersk and or the ports or whatever, why don't you guys put out position paper, like a position paper, like almost like an X Prize, right, for carbon that's happening now with X Prize. I mean, put together your own X Prize, come up with $1 million or more, $5 million, and maybe fund a few programs across different things that you need help with, and put it out there. You'll get, I mean, you probably will get amazing solutions of startups that you could help fund that could create the solution for the problems you're trying to solve. But if people don't know about it, like you said, trying to make it sexy again, like if you don't know about it, there's no real incentive, like then this person's probably going to go build a Web3 company or a crypto company. So it's like, if you can get that out there, what you're trying to solve for, and then also actual capital to help them build that for the industry, if you call it, you know, supply chain industry, whatever it is, I would do that. Like, I mean, there's so much talent in Southern California that's looking for things, projects to work on, and I mean, if they were solving a real, like you said, a real world problem that also could help the environment and all the other things a lot of the Gen Z wants to do, I mean, it's like 100% I would do that if I were your industry.
I can actually talk about that. So Maersk is actually, like, I'm not in the company anymore, but they started a decarbonization project last year. Okay, and they have, I think, pledged more than $5 billion worth of it for sure, and they have an entire team that is working on it. And companies like Maersk are actually expanding and buying these startups, not only in the US but across the world. Okay, so they are actually, because what happens is the companies at scale, at large, they just don't have the resources in terms of focusing on building new technology in place, because they have the resources in running the business and everything else, but just to solely focus on a small problem which has a big impact, or let's say a small like question which has a big effect, in terms of that. That is something which is where they are trying to get into that space. Big companies have like big collaboration, big policies. They try to collaborate with governments and things like that. So, trying to change that mindset from a top-down level is really a challenge. It's not difficult, but it's definitely a challenge. So Maersk has started, and many other companies are also going on the carbon trade-off policies, because they're actually investing in looking into greater depths and greener forests and things like that, which is where they're sending scientists to see which tree has the potential of growing, okay, things like that. So they're investing in those areas, they're buying those areas so that they can decrease their carbon footprint. That's something that happened, like, I heard it in Wall Street Journal a few months back. So that's something which is getting more and more adoption in general. So the only thing is it has to come out, like you said, from the company level to outside public. That's the only thing that is remaining at the moment.
And can the ports, you guys both have experience with the ports, can the ports do anything to help? Because, I mean, think about it. We've got, in Southern California, we have the largest concentration of the top universities, research universities on the entire planet. So if there was, again, more of an effort to pull in the talent that's at all these universities, and or even not, they don't have to be whatever, it's just someone who's extremely talented who could come up with an idea. I don't mean just the environmental, I'm talking about, so like you said, the Zapier of shipping or whatever, like whatever it is. I mean, but I don't know, I just think that if the port and maybe some of the big companies got involved, it could be really cool. And maybe there is something like that underway, but like I can tell you, working for UC Riverside, we don't know about it. Our students don't know about it. Our grad students don't know about it. Professors don't know about it. So if there is something that's already there, the word isn't out, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Can Niraj talk about USC if you're coming from UCR? Is that allowed?
Yeah.
I was in the Global Supply Chain Management program, so that's how I got into the country. So USC has good connections, like active connection, and I worked with the Port of LA for the major side as a project with the Trade-Pack terminal specifically, because like not saying, but we got a good data. I'll just stop at that. So we got good data from them, and active data, and like looking at the entire scope of it. Like at this point, Maersk, the company I was with previously, they partnered with MIT Supply Chain. Okay, but the thing is that it's not about the universities just like collaborating with like some universities. All universities should be like the massive human capital, the knowledge capital that is there across these universities in the US, and the amount of funding that can be allocated. That's where something which is not utilized. We need more collaborations there, and that's where I would suggest is like from personal experiences is if UC Riverside is interested, should reach out to the port. Okay, should reach out to me. I can introduce things like that. So that's where the word has to get out, basically. Like if you just want to learn about something, just Google it. I'm sure you'll find the answers in the first 2 pages. That's one thing. So it's like more or less uptake of such challenges is more important at this point. And there are universities that are doing that. All this GE Energy and there was a hackathon which I was a part of when I was a student in 2017, and we made an app for dual transactions. Of course, it was not taken up, but that's something that was a first start of this application in the port for dual transactions. So things like that, there's a lot of opportunity for that uptake. Okay, and let's say if you're building on something, it's more attractive. Let's say if you go to a VC, it's a similar example. If you have something already built, it's more attractive. Okay, it's better than a presentation. You have something running, you have a concept, you have an idea. If it's transactional, it's much better. So things like that. So just collaboration is not important. Building something at first, taking the first step, and like you said, that's more important as you go forward. So that's, yeah.
I think there's an interesting opportunity for incubators like Core Sector. I would just kind of piggybacking off of what you said, I think there's an interesting opportunity with incubators like Fourth Sector and others that may be similar in terms of matchmaking, right? In terms of identifying the problem, proactively going out and talking to the ports or other entities that may be providers of traction.